Okay, so I was talking about the
Number 6.
number 6. Like when you see the paragraph, first thing you check your how much time you have remaining, okay, and then read the paragraph. And when you're reading the paragraph, right, you will have pen and paper available. Make sure that you ask for the pen and paper. All right. So the second question is not about the port. It says, how do you restrict the VM to have only web applications? You cannot do that with NSG. NSG is only ports, right? So third one is to, yeah. So third one is to ensure that only your account can use RDP to access the VMs. Can we do this with NSG? No, the account level settings are not done in NSG. It is done through at the subscription level policies or other things like Azure AD you can use, but not you cannot use NSG. The fourth one, which is cut off, is that only for the front end VM, disabling the port, enabling the port 80 was the fourth answer. Okay, so these are kind of obvious, right? So don't spend too much time. Like as soon as you put the diagram, just look at the questions, and then if you have to go back, you can go back. Okay. What is this?
Now,
This
before you
was
move up, what's the difference between 2 and 4 then?
2 and 4 here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the 2 is to ensure that the front-end VM hosts only web applications. Meaning, in the front-end VM, you can only put web applications, you cannot put any other software. Make sense?
Okay, so they're not
It's
talking
not,
about
yeah, they're
the
not talking
ports.
about like, port enforcement and things like that, right?
That capability only, okay.
Yeah. This one is the Azure AZ900 because this like is of the PostgreSQL, which is not part of the AZ104, but let's look at that. Your company is planning a deployment using Azure database for PostgreSQL. The deployment should meet the following requirements. So they've given some general requirements like 10 terabyte storage, Azure premium storage, and point-in-time restore for up to 35 days. You need to select the appropriate deployment and pricing tier to meet these requirements and minimize cost. What should you select? Okay, so there are like few things which, I mean, this question we have not covered in our topics at all. But if you look at it, I mean, you should be able to answer mostly correctly. Tell me which one looks to you is something which you would select.
Do the last one.
There is a basic tier, there is a general purpose tier, there is a memory optimized tier, and there is something called a hyperscale.
We'll discuss something about basic.
Yeah, so look at the couple of things, premium, and then the point in time restore. Like last time we did backup and recovery, right? We're talking about what is the default restore time of a backup? Do you remember?
30 days.
30. You see, it is asking for 35 days. Right? So generally those things are not available in basic or standard tier. Okay. Now memory optimized tier is where if it is talking about like huge amount of memory storage, generally database requires it, but it is not talking about that. So those two, like the fourth and second is out. Hyperscale is mainly for using, very high performing database, which it is not talking about. So the only thing is making sense is general purpose tier. Just if you have to guess something which you might not have read, because like in AZ900, they come up with like any service, like couple of them, which you might not have trust, but you can still try to make a good guesstimate.
Even though it says premium, you can use it.
What?
Even though it says premium.
Yeah, premium is available within general purpose tier. Basic tiers generally do not meet your SLA and things like that. And which is like almost common to this SKU or licensing which they talk about across the services. Okay, so the fourth one, what is that? Spot pricing. You remember that? For each of the following statement about Azure spot pricing, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Do you remember what is the spot pricing?
Yes.
Right? You can bid your price, right?
Yeah.
So what is true or false about each of the statements?
The first one is false.
Spot pricing provides access to discounted Azure
Oh,
compute
discounted,
resources.
right. That's true. That's true.
Okay, what is the second one? Spot virtual machines use the standard service level SLAs for Azure VMs.
There are not.
That will be a no.
No, right? It doesn't use any SLAs at all, right? You can set the maximum price that you agree to pay.
Yes.
Yeah, so yes, no, yes. So this should be quick, okay. Oh, I didn't put the answers for this. Okay, so to complete the statement in the answer area, select the appropriate option. So this is like a drop down. They might give you 3 or 4 options. You have to select one of them. This one was easy, but I did not put the options for you. A private cloud requires. So what a private cloud requires is basically when you see the options, pick up the network option whenever you see this, because private cloud requires you in a private network. Okay. whenever you see anything to do with private cloud, first requirement of a private cloud is it has to be in a private network. Sorry, I didn't put the answers here, but it was obvious. So I'm going to the next one. For each of the following statements regarding consumption and fixed cost models, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise no. This is CapEx versus OpEx. Okay. What is a fixed cost model, which is you pay upfront like CapEx, and the consumption based or on-demand model, right? Pay as you go, right? So which statements are true or false regarding each of them? So let's look at the first one. For organizations with consistent high utilization, the consumption-based pricing model is the most efficient one. True or false?
False.
False.
Why not?
Well, because they can reserve,
Yep.
because they are high utilization.
Mm-hmm.
And they are
Okay.
consistent high utilization.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so how will the CapEx help them here?
Well, they will have that 70% discount or whatever
Like
like for the pricing for having
when they
reserve.
reserve it, right?
What?
When they reserve it, they'll get the discount.
When they reserve, they get the discount, but they still pay as you go, right? Or no?
No, they have a contract.
Okay. So let's look at the second one. There are no upfront costs when using consumption-based model. True or false?
True.
It's false.
Let's look at the third one. If the fixed price in the fixed price model, you pay for the resources even if you do not use them.
True.
True.
You pay for resources even
If you don't put it right.
$100 for it.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, so that's true, still pay.
False, true, true. Okay. Is that good?
Yep.
Okay, match each type of cloud computing with its description. Okay, again, the answers you can use once, more than once, or not at all. All right, so it is talking about hybrid cloud, private cloud, and public cloud. Now look at the statements. Cloud resources are owned and operated by a service provider and delivered over the internet.
That's a public cloud.
It's a public cloud, okay. Cloud resources are maintained on a private network and used exclusively by one business or organization.
Private.
Okay. This is a combination of on-prem and infrastructure.
It's a hybrid.
Easy? Okay. Let's go to the next one.
You see, this
Sorry.
is confusing because here they're using private and public in a different sense. For what we understood in the beginning.
What is the difference?
Well, before you remember, we thought about this private and public as they are describing it in this question 11, but before they were talking mostly about the dedicated and not dedicated resources.
So this is what also is talking about dedicated, right? Cloud resources are maintained on a private network and used exclusively by one business or organization. Makes sense?
We were talking mostly about dedicated VMs.
Right. So it's the same thing, right? Yeah, so when you say dedicated, it's only used by one business. It cannot be used across multiple businesses. Make sense?
No, for me, they're just they're playing with the word differently, because when you say, like in the first question, it was like public VM or private VM, they're just talking about dedicated or not dedicated VM. I mean, they are both cloud.
Yeah,
you're not talking about private, like in a network, like your own network.
Yeah, so think about this. This is not talking about on-prem at all. look at this, cloud resources. So they are still cloud resources, are maintained on a private network and used exclusively by one business. They are not talking about on-prem here at all. Makes sense?
Yeah,
It's still a
excellent.
private cloud.
Okay.
Right? Okay. So 12, for each of the described scenarios, select the most appropriate Azure governance technology. So whenever we talk about governance, right, they're talking about roles, permissions, policies, initiatives, right? Those things should immediately come to your mind. So just, whenever governance comes, things like management groups, subscriptions, things like, Azure logs, for example, right? And then try to answer the questions. So basically they have the drop downs and you just select the correct methodology in order to implement some governance scenario. So the first thing is you need to prevent any users from deleting resources from subscription with content spanning multiple resource groups. Okay. So this can be done using Azure logs. If you remember, I talked to you about the Azure logs, right? So you can prevent any users from deleting. Now you can do it multiple ways, right? But what is the easiest way of doing it is also you need to think about it. Okay. The second one is you need to use information from Azure Security Center to develop best practices recommendations for the optimization. So best practices are basically implemented through Azure policies, right? So in the policy, you say what is possible, what is not possible, and all of those things, and then you can either enforce it or you can audit it, right? So select for that. And then you need to define a set of policies to help ensure compliance. So remember, initiative is the group of policies, right?
Yeah.
So your policy, in policy, you will have permissions. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You know the policy, like in policy, you specify the permissions, and then you can apply a policy to a scope, right? A policy can be applied at the subscription level, a policy can be applied to the management group level, a policy can be applied to a particular resource group or a resource. Okay, but let's say you have multiple policies and you want to enforce it as a one compliance mechanism. For example, HIPAA, if you want to implement, it might have 100 policies inside that. So you create an initiative called HIPAA and then apply. Make sense? Right, so just go through the scenarios, but then if you know those scenarios, this will be an easier, answer to pick up quickly. This is something which we have not covered, but this is part of the AZ900 maybe. As I said, like a couple of questions might come from any random services, but I'll explain as I look at some of the questions. So what it's saying is your company is using Azure Blueprints to assist with migration to Azure. User 1 should be able to assign published blueprints. Now this might, but anyway, let me read the question and then answer and then how it can be generalized. You need to add user 1 to a RBAC. So the question is mainly about the role-based access control. Okay. Role necessary to provide this permission. Your solution should follow the principle of least privilege. Right? What is the principle of least privilege? You might have multiple ways to assign a permission, but which will give it a user enough to perform the operation, but not inadvertently perform other operation. Makes sense?
Blueprint operator.
Right? So when you go to the answer is blueprint operator, that is correct. But like, how do you derive that answer, right? So owner, for example, owner has every permission. They can do it, right? But then you are giving unnecessary permissions. So owner is definitely out. Makes sense? Contributor is also similar, right? If you do contributor, he can make a lot of changes. The only thing contributor cannot do compared to owner is do not allow other users to do stuff. But by themselves, they can do a lot of other things, right? So that is also out. because this is a specific operation. For the specific operation, you want to give the permission. Now think about the two other ones, blueprint contributor versus blueprint operator. Which do you think would be least privileged in these two?
Contributor.
The last one?
Contributor is still higher, I said, right? That's
Operator.
just like an owner, except that they cannot assign the permissions to other users, right? So the only answer remains is blueprint operator. The only thing, a trick here is that, do you know that is the blueprint operator allow you to do this operation or not? Make sense?
So operator will have more access.
Operator would have the list access.
At least, oh,
So whenever you see any question where there is an operator along with a functionality, that is the least privilege. So it could be blueprint or it could be ARM template, whatever they ask, look at what is the least privileged access which can do that permission, right? So owner, contributor, those things are going to be completely out. If you see that functionality plus operator or functionality plus owner or functionality plus contributor, always go for the operator one. Functionality means functionality could be blueprint. Functionality could be, ARM. Functionality could be creating VM, for example. Makes sense? There are hundreds of roles in Azure. You will not be able to remember each and every one. But the fundamental idea is about the general roles. What are the three general roles? Do you know in Azure? Three general roles I talked about. Owner, contributor, and
Operator.
reader. Reader means they have only read access. Owner means they have everything. Contributor has read plus write access, but they cannot assign any other users to do any other operations. Make sense? Right? These are the general roles. These general roles are applied to each and every service as well. Okay, so it could be blueprint, it could be, SQL database, it could be your VMs, or it could be storage account. Make sense? So each one, so for example, there is a storage account operator role, there is a storage account contributor role, there is a storage account reader role. Make sense? If somebody gives you the same question about storage account and say that they need to just read the access signature of the storage account, what is the least privileged role? That is going to be the account reader. Make sense? So that they can only read the things, but they cannot perform any write operations. So whenever you look at any questions relating to RBAC, keep this in mind. That will, at least narrow down your options immediately. Make sense? Okay, for each of the following statements regarding Azure Virtual Network Peering, do you remember network peering? Select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. You know what is network peering?
Yes.
What is it?
This connection between two.
VPN.
Yeah, so you connect two VNets, two virtual networks with the peering. Why do you connect? So that one VNet can access the other one, right? That VNet could be on cloud, that VNet could be on-prem. Make sense? Right? So what it is saying is like they're trying to do that. So it has the statements which is true over the peering. Okay. So the first statement is virtual network peering can be used to connect virtual network across Azure regions. True or false?
True.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons why had that peering, right? Second one is virtual network peering can be used to transfer data between Azure AD tenants.
False.
False.
Okay. Configuring peering requires a short downtime for peered virtual networks.
False.
False, right? It doesn't require any downtime. Okay. Good. So let's go to the next one. You're planning to move companies' web applications to Azure. Okay. You want to use Azure security features. you need to understand the difference between authentication and authorization in Azure. You guys know what is the difference? Authentication versus authorization?
Authentication.
Yes.
Domain, the whole domain, not the relations within that domain. Permissions to those.
So what is the difference between
Authorization,
authentication and
what can you do?
Yeah, authentication is who you are,
Who you are.
identifying.
Yeah.
Authorization is what you can do. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Right, so let's look at it. Authentication ensures that the username and password combination is correct.
True.
Yes.
True, right? Authorization ensures that an account has sufficient permission to access a resource.
Yes.
True.
True, right? Authentication can use certificates to identify a person or service.
True.
True. Yeah, you can use the certificates, right?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
So when you create an account, right, and if you want to assign, a user, right? So user can be identified by using things like password. You can do MFA, right? For example, by using the mobile one-time password.
So you're
right?
calling MFA as a certification?
No, there is another one. You can use SSL certificates to identify. This is mainly,
For
applicable to
machines.
applications. So in the application or machine, right?
Yeah.
Those identities, if they want to identify, they can use the SSL certificate to do that as well.
Yeah, I got it now.
Yeah.
For the machines.
Right. So your authorization can use passwords to identify a person.
True.
False, right?
It's false, it's authorization.
This is authorization. It's
Oh.
identity. Yeah,
Not
authentication can
authentication.
use password,
Yeah.
right? So it's basically asking difference between authentication and authorization, nothing else. Okay. Which resource is required to use Azure Cloud Shell? A container, a VM, a storage account, or a web app?
VM.
You can use all of them on cloud, so.
Okay, what is the question?
Which
Did you
one?
understand the question?
What resource required to use?
Which resources is required to use? Oh, required to use. Okay.
Storage account.
Have you used Azure Cloud Shell?
Yeah, you need to create a storage account for that.
You remember first time when I asked you to use the Azure Cloud Shell, right? When you create the Cloud Shell, first it will say you don't have a storage account. And then you create a storage account because Cloud Shell requires your script to be stored somewhere. Okay, your scripts are on that storage account. Okay, so you're accessing the shell through the cloud, which requires your scripts to be on the cloud, and that's why it requires a storage account. Okay, so if you're not done yet, like try again, like go to your account portal and see if you can, but yeah, if you remove all the storage accounts, right, and then try to use the Cloud Shell, the first thing it will ask is to create a storage account.
They'll charge you like minimum amount.
Exactly, they'll charge like very minimum amount. Yeah. Okay, next is about SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS, our first class. Okay, you're planning to use Azure for your company's cloud infrastructure. You just learned that Azure supports software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service offerings. You need to determine the resources that are available for each category. So they've given SaaS, PaaS, and infrastructure as a service, and then you will be given the drop down. Think like those three options are the drop down options, right? So your drop down options are Outlook, SQL database, and VM. And you have to identify which one is the SaaS, which one is the PaaS, and which one is the infrastructure service. Is it easy?
Yep.
Based on what you see on the screen,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay. So let's go to the next one. For each of the following statements regarding security benefits offered by Azure Cloud, select yes if statement is true, otherwise no. So security in Azure Cloud, okay? So the first one, Azure Active Directory is used to manage API cryptographic keys, true or
False.
false?
False.
False.
So what can be used for that?
Keyword.
Keyword. Okay, so when you say false, you should know which answer is true because it might come in a different way, right? It might come saying, hey, keyword is used to manage API cryptographic keys. At that time, you should know it, right? Okay, second one, Azure storage encryption is enabled by default and cannot be disabled.
True? No.
It is
I
true.
know there is a multiple,
Yeah, I
you
don't
can
think it
select
can be enabled.
What?
couple type of different methods to encrypt it.
Really, sir?
Yeah, but you cannot disable it.
Okay.
Okay, so by default, it uses the, remember I showed you the
It's grayed out,
CME,
right?
like, huh?
It's grayed out once you enable it?
Yeah, it is grayed out.
Yeah.
So it is enabled by default, but you can change like which keys you want to
Yeah,
use.
there is like
You-
three different kind of.
Yeah, so you want to use the Azure managed keys or customer managed keys is up to you. Okay, but you cannot disable it. So that's true. What about the last one? Azure Express route is used to secure traffic between the virtual networks.
False.
That's wrong.
It's
What is Express route?
it's tied to data center,
Remember the Express
low
route?
latency route.
So when you want to create a hybrid network, right, between on-prem
Yes.
and the cloud, right? You can use internet, right? So your on-prem can be connected to Azure cloud using internet. But if you don't want to use the general internet, you can create the express route using the Azure partner, which will connect you direct to the nearest region of Azure from the on-prem. Make sense?
Yes.
So express route is only a different mechanism to connect. It is not for the security, it's just for the privacy. Make sense?
So the
Slightly
answer,
tricky one, right? But the answer is that Azure does not secure it in any different way. It's that you are just using a private network. Make sense? So the answer is no.
yeah,
It does not secure traffic differently when you use the express route. It's the same way.
it's a low latency, right?
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next one. A company is deploying a critical business application on two virtual machines. The deployment needs to support highly available access, separate fault and update zones, and minimum latency between the instances. Most users who need to use or access the application are in Azure East US 2 region. Which configuration should be company using to deploy this solution? Separate resource group in the same region, separate regions in a region pair, or separate availability zones?
Second one, separate region and a region pair, because it's a critical high availability. Separate.
But they haven't asked for a disaster recovery at all.
Yeah, then go for the third one.
You see what it is? They are asking for highly available access, separate fault and update zones,
Yes.
and minimal latency.
There is no disaster recovery.
So if you do two separate regions, your latency is going to be very high. Makes sense,
Yeah.
right? So the answer is not that much tricky here. It's straightforward, but and that's why they made it very clear that they want to deploy only one region. If you look at this line, which says Azure East 2 region, right?
So
Because I said because it was a
Last
critical.
one.
When I said the critical,
What?
no, because it says a critical in a question,
Yeah.
so that's why I go for the region, because it's a critical.
Yeah, but they're not worried about disaster recovery.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to perform automated deployments from Azure DevOps. Which of the following enables this process? This goes long back to my third or fourth lecture where we talk about the app services. Do you know Azure App Service?
Yes.
Remember? So that allows you automated deployments, right?
It's a pass, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it enables you to perform automated deployments from the DevOps. In fact, not only from the DevOps, you can deploy from anywhere. Do you remember, like I showed you, like how to deploy a web
Man,
application?
so what is the difference between Azure App Service and a function?
So the function app basically is also a PaaS application, but in app service, right? You still have control over your stack, right? So you choose your operating system, you choose like is your application based on Java or Windows or
Yes.
whatever, right? In function applications, you don't do any of that. You
You
just
don't
write your
code the
Python
code.
functions and you just deploy them.
Okay.
Okay. But if that is also part of this drop down, you can select that one as well, because that also allows you to do automated deployments on the DevOps. Okay. So deployments means your source code is somewhere from where you want to automatically deploy to your infrastructure. So it could be in GitHub, it could be in Azure DevOps repository, right? The app services, function apps, all of them allow you to deploy your applications automatically based on changes in your repository. Okay, let's see this. This is about the public-private clouds on-prem. Okay, your organization hosts its e-commerce solution on a computing infrastructure that is provided by a third-party service provider and shared with other organizations. You only pay for your power, storage, and networking resources you use. What type of cloud computing is this example of?
It's a hybrid. Oh, so your organization has an
Why
e-commerce
not public?
That's what I was looking at too.
computing infrastructure that is provided by a third party.
Third party could be Azure, it could be AWS, right?
Yes.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Don't think too much here.
Because organization and third party.
That's why I confused too. Yeah, it's public.
See, you only pay for compute storage usage, right? See, on-prem, the problem is CapEx, right?
Yeah.
On-prem does not allow you to have a pay-as-you-go model.
They should just
Makes
have one
sense.
cloud. Okay, it's a cloud. Let's you put everything in cloud. I guess we just pay whatever the difference.
Yeah. Sometimes when you're like complex questions and then an easy one, you try to think too much about that.
I think we gotta brush up on this public and private.
Yeah.
I know there's gonna be a lot of questions on these.
Yeah. So all the concepts, I think when you go to AZ 900, most of the questions are based on the concepts.
Yeah.
Like 25 to 30% will be like, what kind of cloud, what kind of service, is it IaaS, is it PaaS, is it, even the examples they gave you are like very simple ones, but then you just need to make sure that you're choosing the right answer. Sometimes it is like marketing. So some questions, when you see Azure's lot of benefits, just choose those. Okay, don't go against that. Yeah. Okay, you need to identify features of resource groups. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise no. Resource group, you remember, right? Okay, so let's try this. Locking a resource group as read-only locks all resources contained in the group. True or false? You remember the locks? Did I show you one of the locks? So the lock applies in a hierarchical manner. So you can apply a lock at the subscription level. You can apply a lock even at the management group level. You can apply a lock at the resource group level or the resource level. When you apply a lock, it basically trickles down in the hierarchy, right? So the answer is true. So, and generally this locks we apply in production, like once production storage you start using, for example, right? You don't want anybody to delete that storage, right? Accidentally. And that's why you apply these locks. So it could be read only lock, it could be delete lock, right? There are only two kinds of locks, read locks and then delete locks. Okay. So second one, a resource group can contain resources from the same region as the resource group only.
False.
False. Okay. You can add a resource to or remove a resource from a resource group as long as the resource group is not locked.
Yep. True.
Okay. Resources can interact with other resources in different resource group.
False.
False.
What? Why cannot? So for
Well,
example, if I created a storage account in one resource group and I created a VM in another resource group, that VM cannot access the storage?
No, they can.
They can, right?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The
Okay,
reflex
another-
is always like when you read resources, you have like a resource group, right? So
Yes.
it's not about the resources themselves, so that's why we said no the first time.
Correct. Okay, so your company is considering using a PaaS environment. You need to determine the responsibilities of customer and provider for several components. So it is asking basically what is PaaS. In PaaS, who is responsible for which component? Okay, which components would be responsibility of a customer and which would be responsibility of the provider? And then they have the drop downs. So in PaaS operating system, who manages?
Provider.
Data?
Data customers.
Data is customer, right? Data and application is always customer, no,
Customers. Yeah.
right? Only in SaaS applications, the application is not your problem. Okay. In SaaS applications, application is also managed by the provider, but data is always a customer's responsibility, no matter what you are using. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Storage depends which layer you are working, right? So if you are using PaaS platform, then storage is the provider's responsibility, right? What about virtualization?
That's also provider.
That's also provider.
PaaS.
If it was, yeah. And applications is customer. Makes sense? Because you deploy the application. Like think like app service is a PaaS, but you're still responsible for your application source code and everything, right? Makes sense? Only if it is SaaS, you're not responsible. For example, Outlook, you're not responsible for that application. You're just using it. But the emails which you store in Outlook is your responsibility. It's a data. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So these are like kind of basic things most of the time you will see in Azure. Again, let's look at again. Sorry, AZ900, I mean. So here again, there is a question about RBAC and governance. Okay, you are researching governance methodologies in Azure. You want to understand role-based access, security, policies, initiatives, and locks. These are the four things actually in the governance model. Okay, you need to choose the type of resource or feature to use for different scenarios. So in which scenario, which governance policy you will choose. Okay. So when should you choose each resource for feature? To answer, drag the appropriate resource or feature. Okay. For each scenario, a resource or feature may be used once, more than once, or not at all. Okay, so you see three, and you have four answers, right? So one is out, and others could be out as well. Let's see. You want to ensure that only SQL database instances can be added to a resource group named database-RG.
Policy, right?
Policy, exactly. So you can create a policy and say, hey, this resource group can only deploy SQL database, right?
Mm-hmm.
Second, you want to ensure that only members of a sales group can access virtual machines in the sales RG resource group.
Wow.
It's still a policy.
Resource.
So what it is saying is you want to ensure that only members of sales group, right?
Are back.
That's a role, right?
It's a role. Make sense? So group identity, right? Make sense?
Yeah, but
Let's
we
say
have the option.
let's say you were to do this, right? Would you use policy or the roles?
Well, I will use rules.
Right? Because what you can do is you can create a sales group in Azure Active Directory, right? You can put all the members of the sales team in that group, right? And then create a role and then assign it to a resource group, right? Because roles can be also trickled down. Make sense? Right? But this in a policy, how would you do that? Policy does not allow you to pick up members, for example, or groups. Make sense?
True.
Right? Okay, so the third one, you want to prevent new resources from being deleted to resource group by anyone.
Lock.
Lock.
Good. Now you are going to be very good in governance and authority.
Home governance?
So try to do a lot of questions like that, right? And you can then go back and read the documentation for a particular topic.
Home governance.
Okay. So to complete the sentence, select the appropriate operation. It was very simple. For example, I selected disaster recovery is the ability to restore a cloud service in the wake of a catastrophic loss, right? So do not overthink in these kind of options. They're like generally simple. Let's see, what is this? About the Microsoft Defender, right? I'm going to skip over this. We'll come back to this in a minute. Let's see. Okay.
So for these yes or no questions, do you get like half of it? Let's say you get 2 out of 3. So that it has to be.
It has to be all
correct.
correct.
Oh.
Okay, so 27, your Azure tenant includes several internet-facing web servers. Okay, the web servers rely on data stored on Azure SQL database servers. So you need to again put a small diagram on the piece of paper. The web servers are located in a different VNet subnets. The database servers have that endpoint exposed to the subnets. Okay. Now you need to implement a detailed controls over the type of connection supported between the between the web servers and the database servers.
I know, I forgot.
You want to, hey, can you mute yourself if you're not talking? You need to implement the detailed controls over the types of connections supported between the web servers and database servers. You want to minimize the efforts and cost necessary to implement and maintain your solution. Which two technologies should be included in your solution? Each correct answer represents part of the solution. So did you understand the question? So you have two different VNet subnets. So you have only one VNet. Understand this. This is very critical. You are on the same virtual network. You have two subnets, right? And then your SQL Server database service. Okay, your database servers have their endpoint exposed in a subnet. So everything is within a subnet, in short, right? Now we need to implement a detailed controls over the type of connection supported between the web and database servers, right? And you want to minimize the efforts. So what you will do, what can help you here? Basically controlling means, your web servers can reach to the database over a particular port, for example, right? Can we do that through NSG?
Yes.
Yes.
You can do that, right? Because we are in simple VNet with subnets, right? So NSG can be applied at the subnet level or a computer level. Okay, NSG cannot go beyond a subnet. Make sense?
It's inside the VNet.
Yes, it's inside the VNet. But in this case, we have a simple VNet, so you can use NSG for that. Can you use user-defined routes to do that?
Before that, Nareen, isn't when you are inside the VNet, the servers have access to each other automatically?
Yeah, exactly. They already have access to each other.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's say you wanted to control it, right? You can still put NSG within the subnet to control it. Makes sense?
That's correct. Yeah.
Right. Same thing with like firewall. Firewall also can fix that. Okay, you can apply firewall at any level. UDR or the routing does not fix that. Makes sense? Its routing is not a kind of a control solution. Okay. Sometimes what you can do is like you can ask router to drop the packets. Okay. So routing, you can do that. I mean, I can say that the subnet machines. So let me draw that so you understand. Sometimes because this question might be asked in a different way and you might have to select the router. That's why I'm going to explain this. So we have VNet here.
Laura, my friend, can you mute yourself if you're not speaking, please?
I don't think she's in her computer. Nareen can.
Maybe I can. Sorry. Okay, thank you. So VNet, right? And then we have subnets here, right? And then in the subnets you have, let's say this is your SQL subnet, right? And then this is your VM subnet or another VM subnet, right? By default, since they're in the same VNet, they can access each other without any issues. Okay, but let's say if I wanted to create a rule on this SQL server that only this subnet are allowed to get inbound port, but not anywhere else, you can always use NSG for that. So NSG you can use at the subnet level, or NSG you can use at the VIC level. Now, with the routing, generally what you say is like, how do I go from A to B, right? So let's say this is your A and this is your B. By default, the default route allows communication between A to B, for example. Okay. If I want to control it, yeah. So I want to control it, right? Let's say I don't want subnet A directly to go to subnet B, right? I can create a rule like this and say, hey, anything going to this subnet. So this subnet has, let's say, the XYZ address, right? Address meaning the CIDR block, right? I can say XYZ CIDR block, and then instead of going inside the VNet, I can say none. Means if I put this role, if I put this route, everything going to this will stop. But I cannot control that, hey, I want only to go on this particular protocol. Make sense? Either routing can shut you off or routing can allow you, right? But routing does not decide only if this protocol, then I'm going to allow. For this protocol, I'm not going to allow. Routing is not used for that. Make sense? Yep. So that's why the user-defined routes in this case will not be an answer. Okay, but sometimes if they tweak something like that, hey, you want to either allow access or not allow access, respect your port and everything, then it might be an option to consider.
So UTLRs?
No, the answer is NSG and firewall.
Oh.
Okay. And then the traffic manager is just like a load balancer. Traffic manager, if you remember, like it's a public load balancer which can like manage the traffic between different DNS. Generally, this is used across the regions and across availability zones, so it doesn't apply here in this case. And traffic manager does not really control how you access a particular machine.
You do 26, because I don't have anything.
Yeah, I will come back because
Oh.
it's about the defender, which I don't think we have touched upon that.
Okay.
Okay, so company wants to expand its cloud presence by deploying additional resources to Azure. So this is like hybrid, okay? You see the first sentence?
Yes.
They want to expand cloud presence by deploying additional resources to Azure. The company plans to use templates based on existing resources to automate the deployment process, ensuring consistent deployment is critical. So, I mean, hybrid doesn't matter. Basically, you have the cloud, you set up certain resources. Now you want to expand, you want to add similar resources by using templates, right? So what it is saying that what should the company use?
ARM.
ARM, right? So those templates are deployed by ARM, Resource Manager.
Azure Resource Manager.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know.
we say, right?
Yeah, we say ARM, but then you need to know full form of ARM as well.
I'll give you my arms. Expand it.
For each of the following statements about CapEx and OpEx, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise no. CapEx costs are fixed, yes or no?
No. Capital expense because if you have more customer, then you will have to buy more servers and everything.
Yeah, but are they fixed or no? Once you fixed means once you purchased, you don't have to pay
Yeah, those are
anything
fixed.
extra for
Yeah,
that,
they're fixed.
right? So that's what they're talking about. Using CapEx for infrastructure spending is a good idea when the demand and fluctuations are unknown.
False.
True or false?
False.
False, right? Because you don't
You
know the
can go
demand,
with
so
the pay as you
yeah,
go.
right. The pay-as-you-go consumption model qualifies for OpEx.
No, for sure.
True.
If you're overthinking this one, then you need to do a lot of reading. Okay. All right, so let's take this one as the last one from this. Then we'll take a break and then we'll move to AZ104. Okay. I'll come back to that 26 again later on.
104.
Yeah, these are different questions I posted, right? So we'll look at those after the break. But let's take this one. Match each statement with the Azure Compute Service being described. To answer, drag the appropriate type of description. Again, it can be used once, more than once, or not at all. So Azure functions, virtual machine, and container instances are the resources. Look at the scenario or the description. Include the virtual processor, memory, storage, and networking resources.
A virtual machine.
Right?
Yeah.
So when you create the virtual machine, you have to define all of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Second, is lightweight virtualized application environment.
Container instance.
Containers.
It's containers. Includes the abstraction of servers, infrastructure, and operating systems.
Azure function.
Functions. Correct. All right, so let's do one thing. Let's take a 15-minute break, and then we'll move on to the Azure 104 questions. And then I want to talk about a couple of other things as well, which will cover that. Okay. So let's take a 15-minute break, and then we'll move to the other question.
Thank you, Nari.
Switch.
This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you. Okay. Let me switch. Okay, so this one, right?
I think I'm on that level, really.
Hmm?
So I think all my labs are deleted now, which is good.
Yeah. Can do more now.
Okay, but I just gotta delete it, right? After I
Yeah,
click
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Right after you make that.
Yeah,
back
immediately after.
storage.
Yeah.
They will send an email, right? If I wanna continue
If
using.
you set it up.
I think, yeah, it is.
If you don't set up, they will not
I
send
don't
you.
wanna
They
be,
send you a bill.
I don't wanna be calling Microsoft, like, why did I get charged for this?
That happened in here. You have to-
I had a $600 bill once
Oh, with, Microsoft?
with us,
Yeah.
like, what is this all about? Like,
Hopefully you got a refund it.
yeah, so what happened at that time was like, they were in, I mean, not beta, but like, I deleted a resource which could not get deleted from their side.
Oh,
So they were like, it was showing up on my account. I could have checked it, but I didn't check it. I just believed it will delete it, right? When you press delete, right? I said, oh, there is one resource which is still running. I said, I deleted long. It was firewall. Firewalls are really expensive. Okay. And I used the web firewall, WAF. So I deleted it. Then they said, no, it is not deleted. I said, like, I deleted it. And you can see the audit that I gave the command and it failed. I mean, it is not my problem, it's their problem. I said, oh, yeah, we'll refund it.
so you could call them if you run into issues like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I immediately call them and they'll fix it. In fact, you can say I was just learning, right? And
Yeah.
then I kept it. Oh, I don't know when I need to delete it. They will take it for 1 or 2 times if you call. They'll take that as
Right.
well. But then beyond that, they will not take that. You can say I was learning. I don't know. Maybe sorry, my mistake. They'll refund you. Okay, let's go back to 104. Hope everybody's online and available. Let's start. So this is more from the 104 exams. Okay, so we're going to go through them, and then I have given you the answer sheets as well, which have certain links to certain question answers. So, and we'll go through that. So let's start. Again, if you have noticed, right, the other questions, we took almost 1.5 hours. You will have only 65 minutes to do more questions than what we covered. Okay, so be cautious about the time. Okay. All right. So let's get started. When you're creating an Azure public load balancer, which option allows you to set the load balancer as public? Is this the SKU, subscription, public IP address, or the type?
Type.
It's a type. When you create a load balancer, the first thing it will ask you, is it in a public load balancer or internal load balancer, and in the type section. Okay, so type decides, is it an internal or public? Let's look at this. Maybe I want to zoom it. Give me 1 second. Do it like this. Yeah. Not good. Instead, I'll zoom it. Where is zoom in PDF? Give me 1 second. Here. Okay. So second question is about Azure Bastion host. So Azure Bastion is a host which is deployed in the Azure network. Its purpose is to allow the user to connect seamlessly with RDP and SSH through the browser instead of RDP software. Select the steps to use Azure Bastion, put them in a correct sequence. I don't think we have done this in a lab, right?
No, we haven't.
Okay, so just be aware that this is one of the service which sometimes comes up in the exam. So what is Azure Bastion? So if you remember, like, let me go to the point.
It's a network. It's just like a firewall to let you connect two or more organizations together and let you share one data center
Right. So let me show you that
or
on the
database.
portal. So if you go to portal.azure.com, and then let's say you want to create a VM, right? Let's say I want to create here, let's go to the virtual machine. And let's say I want to create a Windows VM. So look at the question. It's for allowing RDP and SSH access to any of the VMs. Okay. So the idea is that whenever I create a VM, so what problem it solves? Let me just show you that. So if you remember, like any VMs we would have created, right? Either Linux or Windows, right? In order to do anything with the VM or connect to the VM, what did we do? Do you remember? Let's say your Windows VM. I don't have my mouse, so let's say this has been okay. And then when you deployed this VM, you wanted to connect it, right? So that you can install softwares on that, etc. So how did you connect to that? So you used RDP, right? And in order to use the RDP, you have to do one more thing on the NSG, right? You have to open that port up, right? Make sense? Right? Now, think about like organizations who want to, deploy the VMs and then install the like web servers and things like that. If they allow people to connect to that VM over the internet, that's not a good idea, right? Right? So you can do with the RDP, right? Your username, password, but still you're connecting over the internet. Makes sense? And for that, you have to keep that port open, either an SSH port, which is 22, or your RDP port. Make sense? Right? So what if I wanted to still connect with the VM and work with the VM, but I do not want to open up these ports, right? So if you want to do that, there's something called Bastion service. So what it allows is basically when you deploy your VM, you don't have to open any of these ports, okay? But once your VM is deployed, you want to connect and do certain stuff on your VM, you can use this service. So you can basically, access this machine over this service. Make sense? So this is the Bastion service, is like a PaaS platform, a PaaS service which you can deploy and use to connect to your VM to do stuff. So here, if I go and let's say create a VM, for example, right? Let me do that. Let's quickly and show you this. Right? And then let's say Windows machine, right? And then give the name, okay. And then you see here, it is saying I need to open this port, right? In order to connect. So it is saying, make this port open. Let's say I don't want to allow that, right? I can remove that. Okay. Why it is doing this?
Just select none on top.
No, where is, yeah, that's what I'm.
Public port.
The one before it, public inbound ports, none with allowed selected ports right above it.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
why. Okay, sorry. I'm getting confused now. Okay, so let's say if I created this without much issues.
VM name.
case, I'll say Windows VM2. I'm covering this because sometimes it is, I have seen this coming up in the exams. So, but it is a way, I mean, generally the purpose of the version service is to allow you to connect to your VMs without opening any ports, right? So if you want to do some certain maintenance, you want to run certain scripts or install some software, you can do that over this service.
So they consider NSGs are more secure.
Yeah, so then in NSG, you don't have to open any ports for that. Okay, so the way it works is that wherever your machine is deployed in that VNet, it creates a subnet and then deploys this service. Okay.
Yeah.
So this service you connect only through port number 80, like a browser, and then internally it does a port forward using the RDP.
How does it know? How does it know that I'm allowed to get into that?
So in order to do that, you have to do any RBAC based. Yes. Yeah. So when you create your VMs, right, you would have seen this connect box, right? So you do connect, you can do RDP, SSH, or you see this option Bashan, right? So if you're not open up the ports, you can use this service called Bashan, right? In order to do that, you have to first create Bashan, okay? So what you do is you can say, hey, I want to create Azure Bashan using defaults, for example, okay? So let's see here, so you have an option to do that. Right, so you're on here, Bashan, right? So let's say I want to create a Azure Bashan. The first step is to create this, right? So what it will create is it will create a Bashan VNet, right? And it will create subnet inside that. And from there, it will be able to communicate with your machine. So it's like a port forward, but from your perspective, you're connecting to Bashan service using a browser. In the browser, it will show you everything like RDP connections and all.
You can only use it on the browser?
Yeah. So basically, your inbound is only 80 open on that Bashan service, and you don't have to open any other port across any other machines.
Is that because we did the default? Or it's always like that?
When you say default, what do you mean by the default?
I mean, you can configure the Bashan to have a SSH too, right?
Yeah. It will allow you SSH, RDP, all the connections, but over the browser. Make sense? So
Okay,
the way it works is like this. So Bashan is available only on port number 80 and 443, right? So this service is like this, right? So you connect using these ports to Bashan. Internally, Bashan then goes and connects to your VMs. So let's say your Windows VM, right? Make sense? So it will do RDP with this VMs. If you're a Linux VMs, you will do SSH over this. But this SSH and RDP open is between the Bashan and your workstations, right? Which you want to connect to, but not between you and those machines. Make sense?
Yeah.
So only you can use that.
Yeah. But that service service is priced, it's a pass service, right? So there's certain cost associated with using that. Okay, so let it come back and then I'll show you like how you connect to that. But then the question here is the sequence, like what do you do, right? If you want to deploy Bash and service, these are the steps you will take. They're asking you to put in the right sequence. Can you tell me what will be the first step?
Connect to Azure portal.
First, you
Deploy
need
the
to open the
Bash.
portal, right? Use browser to connect to the Azure portal, right? Then
Deploy the Bash.
deploy the Bash and host, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these two things which we are doing right now. Then you have to select the VM you want to connect to. And then that RDP or SSH session will open in your browser. Make sense?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, generally, even I don't show you that, you would be able to guess at least the sequence right here, correct? Okay, so let's go to the next one. If it comes up, I'll show you like how it looks like. Okay, let's see the next one. Which is true about associating a network security group to an Azure virtual machine? So you're connecting a network security group to a Azure virtual machine and saying, how can you do that? Like where you can add that NSG or attach NSG to, right? So the first answer is it can only be associated with a subnet. Second is it can only be associated with a specific network interface. Third is it is associated automatically, or it can be associated with a subnet or a specific network interface.
I think the last two are both looks right.
Yeah, NSC you can put at both levels. You remember I showed you the diagram? We connected one NSG to subnet, one NSG to the VM, right? So the subnet level NSG kicks in first and the VM level NSG kicks in second. Make sense? So it can be associated with both. Okay. Ooh, again Bashan. Azure Bashan is service that is considered to be.
Yes, you just said it.
I just said it, right? Application, not the SaaS application. And definitely to deploy that, we did not select any VM. Makes sense. Private DNS. You remember the DNS?
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
To your
I think again, Naren, you are cutting off.
man, I'm on the wired network. Am I still audible? Can you guys still hear me or not?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Now
Oh.
we can, yeah.
Okay, if you look at the answers. Uses all common DNS record types, not available in all Azure regions. no split brain DNS support. So bearing the last, which two are the correct answers? Anyways, the last one is not the right answer.
The last two are false.
Hmm?
The last two are not true, though.
Right. The first two are the true ones. Okay. The DNS service is available in all the regions, just to remember, okay? Because sometimes they might ask you some specific service which may not be available. Typically in AZ 900, if they ask, they might ask like, AI and ML services, which are not available in all the regions. Okay, which Azure service is used to monitor and repair the network health of infrastructure as a service products? Network Watcher, Application Insights, Azure Monitor, or Network Resource Monitoring?
Network Watcher.
Hmm?
Network Watcher.
Network Watcher, you remember? Whenever you create any network, it by default creates a Network Watcher service. It doesn't even ask you, right?
Yes.
And that service is responsible for repairing, right? So under the Network Watcher, I showed you all the other services. You remember what you can do under the Network Watcher? You can do IP flow, right? You can check flow between the two machines, right? You can do connection checking, right? Remember? You don't just like go to the portal and look for the Network Watcher service. So this version is on. So I can like put my Azure username password here, and I'll just show you that first. Then when I connect here using Bastion, you see it goes onto the browser. But it will show me my whole RDP session here. You see here, I'm connected to my machine through RDP, but that is between Bastion and that machine. I can do any interaction using browser. Make sense?
Yep.
So this is how Bastion works. If it was on Linux, it will show me SSH, and I can do SSH communication as well, but on the browser. Okay, so that's what the Bastion is all about. So let's go back to the last question. What was that about? Network Watcher, right? So Network Watcher, right? Remember I showed you all this IP flow verify, energy diagnostic, next hop, packet capture, right? These are all available under the Network Watcher to fix your network problems.
Do we have to
If you
remember all
wanted-
those?
Hmm?
Do we have to
Yes.
memorize all those?
Memorize means you should know like which service is used for what. For example, IP flow, it will basically do a trace between two IPs on the network, and it will tell you where it is blocking the connection. Make sense?
Yeah.
NSG is just to see if some NSG rule is blocking the connection, right? Next hop is to check if your router entry is not allowing you to go to the next hop. Make sense? So this is for the router, this is for your NSC, this is for typically checking two IP flows between the two machines. Okay, packet capture, did you talk about this as well, right? Packet capture is on a given NIC network, you want to capture all the packets are going out and coming in, you can use this. But they're all part of the Network Watcher service. Okay. So that's what it is asking for. Which service is responsible for monitoring and repairing the network health? Okay. Which Azure service is used to monitor on-prem connectivity? The Network Watcher is for within the cloud. It does not allow typically to go out of this network to check something. Okay. Can you use any other service to do check an on-prem connectivity?
Azure Monitor.
It is monitor. Okay, so you remember like on-prem connectivity means a thing like a network, right? You do
But there's
VNet
only
to
one makes sense.
right, that is correct. But think about this like logically, right? You have two VNets, right? And you're doing two VNet peering in order to check your on-prem connectivity. Makes sense? From your VPN gateway to VPN gateway, right? And in monitor, you can see and then fix those problems, right? Alerts is for alerting purpose, right? Logs is for creating logs. I mean, if you look at this, right, only one makes sense here. But like if they would have put network watcher, for example, right, that will make it slightly tricky. Make sense? Okay, a popular way to control outbound network access from Azure subnet. So you have Azure subnet and you want to control the outbound network control or network access, which can be configured to include default roles, application rules, and network rules, is to use an Azure firewall. Yeah, so firewall allows you to, do the application rules and network rules, right? Well, policy and Azure SQL database does not make any sense, actually. Okay, so here is another one. Following are the high-level steps to host and manage your DNS in Azure. Okay, put them in the right sequence. I would have shown you this in the Azure AD class, right? How do you bring your own DNS, right?
Okay, the first one should be must have administrative right to full control of domain.
So prerequisite is always first, right? So it's a prerequisite. Okay, then what you will do?
Create a DNS zone.
You first create a DNS zone, good, and then
Verify the delegation.
Oh,
Or delegate the domain, sorry.
I don't got the server name, you gotta get through the name.
how do you delegate the domain?
Fine.
By submitting, putting a name.
Yeah, so how do you get those names? You need to retrieve the name servers first, right?
Yeah.
Right. So retrieve the name servers, then delegate the domain, verify the
Then
domain.
verify the domain.
Make sense?
Delegate
Right.
step 3.
Yeah. So what happens, right? If you remember, like you create a DNS zone, right? Then what you need to do is like whoever is your domain registrar, right? You need to inform them, right? For that, you need the name servers addresses from the Azure. So you retrieve the name servers, go to your registrar, delegate the domain. Delegate domain means go and specify your name servers, and then come back to Azure and do the verification. Remember, I showed you those steps, right? But anyways, so one thing here I want to note is that I shared you the answers to key sheet, and there is a reason for that. Let me show you. I think I made a, yeah. So sometimes what happens is like, we know like kind of things like when you see the Azure portal, you might remember like what to do first, second, third as well. But in the exam, you don't have it in front of you, right? So sometimes it is always good that these things you do go and remember. And for that, there are some documentation available. So that's why I put this link here. So I want you to go there here. So and explain what this is all about. Give me 1 second. So if you go to Microsoft Learn, there is a documentation section. Okay, when you're preparing for your exam, I want you to bookmark this link, because if you go here, there are a lot of things available which you can directly go through and review. Okay, so for example, there are certain tutorials here.
Oh.
Oh.
The other class, they all wanted to come in.
Oh. Okay. So in the documentation, you can go to particular topic and just review it. When you have like this kind of sequence of steps coming in, they might be out of the tutorials here. You see here, host your domain in Azure DNS.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
If I were to just review the steps, see here, prerequisite, create a DNS zone, just see the topic high level, even if you don't go. Retrieve the name servers, delegate the domain, verify the delegation, and that's it. Make sense? Just review those things.
And I think they have it in the top, in the title, in the
Yeah, they do.
Exactly.
index, like, yeah.
Make sense? Right? I would strongly suggest to at least like DNS, VMs, where there are high chances of asking them sequences, just go through this quickly. I would recommend that you perform these steps as well, so you remember, because in real life you might have to do that. But just for the sequence's sakes, if you've gone like 1 or 2 times, I don't think you will miss the sequence in the exam. Okay, but go to like DNS, for example. Let's say you want to go, like we are talking about public-private DNS. If you want to, and one of the other things which I want you to look at is, and sometimes you will have something called FAQs and how-to guides, right? If you go to reference here, let's see, here FAQs, where the FAQs here? Is it resources? There are certain resources available, but those are not that important. Give me 1 second. Concepts you can go through high level. Okay, here they will talk about certain things, right? Which maybe if you're missing, like, hey, what are the security features or things like that, I will be here. But in any section you get FAQs, those are the things that might just pop up on the exam. Okay, just keep that in mind. So any topic you can just go through the overview first, then do the tutorials and features, I think. And then if they have FAQs, just go through the FAQ. I don't know if they have FAQ. Yeah. So for example, in the concept review FAQ, sometimes what happens is the questions directly come from these FAQs. Okay, you don't have to go through too much detail, but like at high level, if you glance through the FAQs, it doesn't harm. Okay. And you can search on any topics. For example, file. Let's see the firewall documentation. Here. I'm going everywhere. And I'll give you all those links most probably. So at least you can go through those. Okay. But this is a nice, the documentation is organized in a nice way. Okay. So the main thing is just go through the overview first. Tutorials, just to look at some of the sequences. You don't have to look at all the sequences. Okay. Some high level. And then go through the concepts and then the FAQs. That should be enough for, and you have only 5 topics. It's a good sign. So go through those 5 topics and the subtopics of that. But that will help you. And you will see those steps are the whatever is highlighted there are the ones which are given here in terms of sequencing. Okay, this is another one. When configuring and deploying Azure Firewall using Portal, you can expect to complete the following steps. Put the items in the correct sequence. Let's guess. What will be the first one?
Set up a network.
Yeah.
You have to set up the network first. Okay, then
Create a default route. Oh.
Configure the network rules.
network rule and application rules are created on the firewall, right? So you have to first create the firewall, right? So first set up the network, then deploy the firewall, right? Then create the default route, and then set up your rules. And now the application rule versus the network rule, which one you will typically create first? Do you know?
Network rule.
Typically, you will create a network rule first, and then the application rule. But if this two you're messed up, you will still get the right answer. Okay. You can do it in any sequence from the portal perspective. Okay. Typically, network rules are at the IP level and smaller level. Application rules are at the application group rules, right? So typically, your network rules you set up first before the application rules, but there is no sequence enforced by Azure saying, hey, you can only do application rules after the network rules.
So what are you saying? Any one of them?
Yeah, any one of them is correct, but like typically an admin will set up a network rule before setting up the application rules. So I would maintain that sequence, but any one of them is fine in the sequence perspective, one after another. Okay, I think they would have something like that. Let me see in my answer keys if I put the reference for that as well. Oh yeah, see here it's this
You did the application rule first.
Where? In the oh, why did I put the same thing? Oh, I did put the network rule and then test file. I put the application rule first, right? But generally you will get the network rules first. And I put a wrong link here, but let's see. Should be there for the firewall as well.
So network, configure network is the fourth step?
No. So first you deploy the first configure the network on which you want to create the firewall, right? Because firewall will need a certain subnet, right? Let me see, where is the firewall documentation? Can I search? Searching like this, right? Yeah, it is there. Okay. So like if you go here, right?
What's the step?
In the tutorials, right? Deploy and configure. As you see here,
Yes.
it's like an example with set up the networks. You see the first one, set up the network. They come exactly like this and create your VNet is part of that network, right? So deploy the firewall, that's the second one, right?
Yes.
And then create a default route is the third one. You can see here.
Okay.
Here they have created application rule first, but network rule next, but it doesn't matter. Okay, these two sequences might be okay because generally you have the tabs, so you can do either a network rule first or a application rule first. Okay. So generally, if they put sequences, they would be straight from the tutorials like this rather than any complex kind of scenario. But as far as you have like practiced it in the portal and then gone through this, the basic ones, you should be good enough. Okay, let's do question 11. Now here there is you have to match the correct one. Okay. So for example, you can connect your on-prem networks and on-prem computers and networks to virtual network by using any combination of the following options. Match the term on the left with the description on the right. Okay, so there is a term and the description. Make sense? Right? So there is a point-to-site virtual VPN connectivity. There's site-to-site VPN, and there's an Azure Express route. And
Okay,
then
the
you have
first one should be the Azure Express route.
Okay, so the matching item name is here, the first one. is established through a private connection. Traffic does not go through the internet. So that we are clear,
Azure
right?
Express.
That's express route, right? Okay, the second one is established when a virtual network is connected through a single computer in a network. Encrypted data is sent through the tunnel over the internet.
Point to
What's
site.
point to site?
It's a point to site because you're connecting one single equipment to the network. And then if you see the last is about instead of computer, it is site, right? It's established when an on-prem VPN service is connected through an Azure VPN gateway in the network, and encrypted data is sent through the tunnel over the internet. So this is VPN to VPN hybrid connectivity, right? Site to site. Make sense? Right? So you'll get questions like this to mix, the match. Like here is another one. Match the Azure object on the left with the description on the right. Application gateway, internal load balancer, traffic manager, and routing. Make sense? Right? So let's look at the right side. Creates a table for each subnet that adds default routes between Azure on-prem and internet resources.
It says route, so it's a routing.
Routing, right? Okay. DNS-based traffic load balancer that enables you to distribute traffic optionally to services access global Azure regions while providing high availability and responsiveness.
Traffic manager.
Traffic manager.
Yeah, because this DNS goes across the regions, right? Distributes inbound flow that arrive at the front end to backend pulls instances. This flow go according to rules and health probes.
Load balancer.
Load balancer, yeah.
So it's a load balancer, but it's an internal load balancer. Okay. The fourth one is can make routing decision based on the additional attributes of an HTTP request.
Gateway.
Application gateway.
So application gateway is also a load balancer, but it's a layer 7 load
Layer
balancer,
7.
right? So it can look at the application
And
headers
the
like
regular one is
HTTP
layer
headers.
4, right?
Yeah, internal load balancer is a
Layer 4.
layer 4 load balancer. So it cannot look at the HTTP request. So that's the only difference between the two. I mean, there are a lot of other differences, but from this perspective, questions perspective. Okay, which of the following code snippets would list web apps connection strings? So they have given some CLI commands, right? And you will see some of them, PowerShell and CLI on AZ110, for example. And that's why I always assign you homework to do using those CLIs, right? Can you tell me which is the right answer here? The first one is AZ, web app list connection string list.
The first one.
Okay. So one thing to remember about the CLI, if you practice CLI based on what I told or what I have given the homework, you need to realize its format. Okay, and it's a kind of a standard format. So when you are writing your AZ commands, let me put that in the notepad. Here is the format you would have realized if you've done the practice. It always starts with AZ, right? But
Yes.
so here all of the 4 are AZ, so now we cannot eliminate any of them, right? Then you talk about the resource. So web app is the resource. Okay, so its format is like this: AZ and then the resource. Okay, and then what action you want to take on the resource. Typically, this will be a format. If the resource has a sub-resource, right? If resource has a sub-resource, it would be something like this: resource, right? Configuration, sub-resource, and action. Now you see from this perspective, web app is the main resource, right? So everything starts with web app, so we cannot eliminate any of that. Now third thing is the action. right? Now we can say that the action which we are taking is which action? We want to list the web
List.
applications connection string, right? So it could be list, right? So new and create are out of the question. Make sense? Right? Or it could be config if it is a part of the web app. Make sense? Now the question is the connection string part of the web app, or is it an independent resource? If it is a part of the resource, then we will have configs, web app config connection string, and then the action list. Make sense? So in our case, the answer would be the fourth one, AZ web app. I want to go to the config. From the config, I want to take an attribute, and then I want to do some action. Maybe I want to change it, or I want to list it, or I want to delete it, for example. Make sense? Right? So if you practice this command, you would know this is a kind of standard to follow. Like this is how the AZ commands are created and used. Okay. One thing is AZ commands and PowerShell commands, they regularly would come up in AZ 104. Okay. So when I showed you that documentation, in that documentation, they have related commands as well. So you can go through them. Okay. And then at least look at the commands. Even if you don't practice it, look at the formats. So you would know like what comes first, what comes later on. So at least you can eliminate what doesn't make sense and make the right choices of the answers. Okay, so again, reiterating, this would be easy, followed by web app, config, connection string, and list. If a connection string was an independent resource, it would be easy, connection string, list. Okay. All right. The next question. The ability to get more CPU, memory, disk space, and other features in an Azure web app service is called what? Scale up, scale out, around, or through?
Scale out.
Up or out? Other two things we all know they are
The
like.
up is a vertical. Out is horizontal.
It's a vertical, right?
Yes.
So if the question was like adding more VMs, that would be scale out. Make sense? But if it is adding more CPU, memory, disk space, it's a scaling up. Make sense? It's a vertical scaling. So app service has both scale up and scale out. You can do scale up by modifying this, or you can do scale out by adding VMs. Okay.
More drag and drop.
Is it? Oh man. Okay.
That's so long.
If you wish to add a data disk to a virtual machine that has already been created, you must do the following. So basically what we are saying is we want to add an additional data disk to VM, right? What will be your sequence? Tell me.
Okay, first sign into the Azure portal.
Sign into the portal. Okay.
Second thing, select virtual machine.
Yes, select virtual machine first.
So you need to select the virtual machine, right? So you'll say select virtual machines.
Yep.
Right?
Then select a VM you wish to add the disk.
Then you select the VM you want to add the hard disk to, right?
Yep.
Then what you will do?
Select the disk page.
Then you have to go to this section, right? Select this section. Then what you will do?
Select create disk and name the disk.
The disk is not there, right? So you'll have to create the disk, right?
Yep. And then see the new disk list under the data disk and
No.
save.
Before that, there is a click save. That's the trick.
Ah.
So that's 6.
Okay, and then select and then see the new disk listed under the data disk. Make sense?
Yep.
Right? But you have to just make sure that you are doing it. So try some of these things in the portal as well, right? So like we just created a VM, right? For example.
It could take like 10 minutes just to figure that out.
Can you imagine if they have like 5 questions like this, drag and drop.
Yeah, that'll take forever.
So you will just put in the review first and you'll go through all
I'm
of
just
them.
gonna bring these notes with me.
Yes, so like, for example, here, right, we have VM, we want to add a disk, right? You will go to this section first. Right?
And Naren, I'm assuming that you cannot Google, right? While you taking the exam.
I don't think,
Open book.
no, they won't allow you to do that. So you create, it's not an open book exam. So create, okay.
Nareen?
Yeah,
Because you are in the VM, that's why you are selecting the disk there, right? You first have to select the VM, right?
yeah. So I mean, I was just showing you like how to create, like
Okay.
you can create a disk from here, and then once you save that disk, that will be available here for you to choose. So that section I was showing you.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so let's go to the next one. So they're not asking you complex operations, but they're just making sure that you have done that, right? So, okay, which of the following statements are true regarding ARM templates?
I know the first
Select-
one is true for sure.
JSON is definitely true. We have seen
Yep.
that.
XML is not, so we can.
XML is out.
Yep.
Okay.
The Visual Studio one is also wrong.
Yeah, that's also false because we are done through portal, right?
You don't to create virtual machine. That's not right too. So the second one, you don't completely use
Yeah.
orchestration.
So you see the last three doesn't make sense.
Yep.
Right. First we knew already, right? The second one will be like on and off. So you can just eliminate the last three, right? Sometimes you might have to use that technique when you're not sure. Okay. Whew, very
Here we go
complex
again.
questions.
JSON.
Okay. So these are the relievers. Okay.
To gain some times for edits, right?
Right. Okay. So the action of spreading workloads across different virtual machines to gain high throughput and performance and to create redundancy is called.
Availability.
Okay, this is another reliever for you. Okay, which CLI code is used to create basic app service plan?
See?
First one, easy service plan. So we start with
CLI
easy.
starts only with the AZ,
Easy,
right?
yes.
So there is no other option you have. Right? So you shouldn't be spending too much time on these questions so that you can spend time on the right questions. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay. It could be none of the above though, sorry. Okay, they might have put some tricky here which doesn't create a service plan. Then you might be in trouble, but most of the time, none of the above is not an answer, just to give you a tip. Okay. And you can see the format here, right? AZ, then resource, right?
An action.
Then create, and then the options. Make sense? Okay. Here. What are some of the benefits of using ACI, Azure Container Instances?
The first one, they are fast and yeah, they are faster than VMs.
Second one doesn't make sense, right?
Third one.
There are no benefits.
Third one.
So
And the
three.
third one,
Yeah. So these kind of questions, I think you should quickly attempt. Okay. So what is true about Azure custom script extensions? There are like 10 options here. Okay.
This is a 10 minutes.
This shouldn't be a 10-minute one. So start reading. Customer script extensions are used to download and execute scripts on Azure VM machines. That's a true, correct? Now custom scripts extensions do not exist. That you can take it out, right? Custom script extensions can be run through CLI, PowerShell, REST API, and Azure portal. Most of the time, if you see this option, most of the time this will be true. Okay, meaning any action you can create on do in portal is available through CLI, PowerShell, and REST API. Okay.
Can they squeeze something wrong in there?
What?
Can they squeeze some option that is wrong?
Yeah, if they put something different, but generally I haven't seen that. Generally, you would you would see that in this like CLI PowerShell, and sometimes they put like Windows, Mac, on Linux, because CLI runs on all of the three. Okay, and Cloud Shell also runs on all of the three. Right, so they might say from Windows machine or Apple Mac or whatever, they're still also true. You can do it across all of them. Okay, but they might put like iOS, for example, on there. Let's look at the next one. Custom script extensions can be used on Linux virtual machines.
Yep.
Custom script extensions cannot be used in Linux. So you know which ones are true, right? One,
We already
3, and
have
4.
1, 3, and 4.
Because others generally do not make any sense, right? Sometimes you might get all of above kind of thing, but here they're contradictory, not, so it will not be there. Okay, the templating functionality used in Azure to modify resources called
ARM.
ARM. Good. Azure Resource Manager, we talked about it. Now, here are the questions you might get where you have an exhibit. So you have to click on that exhibit button to see what they're talking about. Exhibit could be a diagram like a network diagram, or it could be a script or whatever. Okay. So what they're saying is, according to the code snippet in the exhibit, what is the first line of code new AZVM doing?
It says
Okay.
it, new AZVM.
Azure virtual machine, they're creating one.
Yeah.
But then you have two options, right? Look at the first one, creating a base virtual machine. Second is instantiating the AZVM class for the purpose of creating a customized VM. Third and fourth doesn't make sense, right? Because the command is new AZVM. Okay, now you will get confused if you have done a lot of PowerShell. Okay, let me tell you. If you're not used PowerShell, for you, the answer is simple. The first one, right? Creating a base virtual machine. In PowerShell, what you can do is like you can use variables to create different objects and then use those variables in your script again. Here we are not creating a variable, so the second like instantiating a AZVM class does not apply here. Okay, but let's say they have done something like this. X is equal to new AZVM. Okay, then what you're creating is just a variable. You're not actually executing the command. Okay, so just do some PowerShell practice, like some basic ones, you'll get an idea. But here it's very simple. New AZVM, creating a base virtual machine should not take much time.
But okay.
Okay. What types of containers can be configured in Azure?
The Kubernetes, for sure.
Kubernetes is for sure, but they have to have two answers.
Yeah,
ACI, we just talked about, it was in the question, right?
Yeah.
Itself. So when you're creating an Azure Kubernetes cluster, what is true about VM node size property? So when you create a cluster, right? A cluster is made up of nodes. So it is saying that what is true about that node size, like when you select a node or a computer for a cluster. The first option is the VM size can be changed in the Azure portal after the cluster has been deployed. Is it true or false?
I don't think so.
It is false, because think about it, like you created the whole Kubernetes clusters, you created nodes, you deployed pods on that, right? It cannot resize it dynamically. If you're normal VM, we would be able to resize it using the vertical resizing. But once the cluster has the node size, you cannot change it. Okay, so that is not true. The VM size can never be changed after the cluster has been deployed. And that's true. In fact, there is a procedure. If you wanted to actually change the node size, the procedure is to create a new cluster with the node size, new node size, move all your ports there, and then remove your old cluster. Okay. We're not going to look at any other options after that, but anyway, so here, another exhibit. according to the code snippet in the exhibit, which type of disk is being added to a virtual machine? So here is the PowerShell. Okay. So it is creating certain variables first, right? Variable name and then value, variable name and value. What you need to focus on is the disk, right? What the question is about. Which type of disk is being added to the VM machine?
Plus data disk 1.
So if you see, the command is update AZVM, right? So you're updating a VM and then you're supplying a $VM parameter. The $VM parameter should have a disk. Okay, so if you look at it, you see this. So get AZVM name and then get the RG name. Okay. And then there is a add data disk. You see here, add AZVM data disk. VM name is data disk name. Create option is attach. Right? Makes sense? So what it is saying is which kind of disk is getting added.
New blank.
So in the create option, you have empty here, right? In the disk config. You see here in the variable, the new AZ disk config, right, is creating an empty disk here. So your answer should be the empty disk, the first, the new blank disk.
But after the, oh yeah, it's 128. Yep,
Yeah.
makes sense.
How are access keys managed in Azure storage accounts? Can you do it in manually? Can you do it through an Azure Key Vault? Can you do it through an ARM template? Can you do CLI?
Yep, all of the
You
above.
know the answers. It's all of the above. When you're naming storage accounts, there are some rules. Storage account names must be between 3 and 24 characters. Storage account names must contain letters and numbers only.
No,
Storage
it's
accounts must be
it's third one.
unique.
It must be unique.
What about the names? Size?
All above.
It's all of above.
I don't remember having a number.
You cannot put hyphen in the storage account. If you want to try, you can create one. It will not allow any special characters in the storage account. Why? It has to be
It says
globally
a
unique.
storage account must contain letters and numbers only.
Yeah,
Okay.
so you can,
Yeah, makes
yeah,
sense.
so it cannot contain the special characters. You know why?
Unique.
It is because of
it's a
this
legal
third
thing.
property. It is account is unique. Why it has to be a unique?
Because you're gonna get the link, right?
Web access.
Link. So in HTTPS address, you will never see a special characters in any HTTPS address. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Right. So that's why the second also must be true. Letters and numbers. Any website, you will not see special characters. Okay. And that's why these are all true. Make sense?
Okay.
So let's go here. Match the type of storage on left with the description on the right. They're jumbled up. Okay. What is a blob?
Blob, you can store anything. So it should be last
S3.
one. No, not the last, second last.
Second last, right? Can hold any type of object, right? Including any non-regular files like VM images, movies, pictures, URIs, right? What about storage file?
Storage file can hold any regular file, text such as Excel, text
Yeah, so
file,
the last one,
HTML.
right? What about the queue?
Use are for messages.
Yeah, and table has rows and columns and all that,
Yep.
right? Okay. Sometimes if you get confused, whatever is clear, just pick those first and then, pick up if something is confusing. Okay. All right. When you're using easy copy, which of the following statements are true? So easy copy is basically similar to the storage explorer on the command line, right? So what you can use it for? Can you copy blobs to Azure storage account using that?
Copy file to the Azure storage account.
So you're saying, can you use easy copy command for moving and copying files and blobs across storage account?
True, right?
I think it's all of the above.
All of the above, right? If one is true, I think all of them is true. Okay, and you will see that when all of them is about true, most of the time you will not see not kind of an answer. You will not see negative statements there. Okay, just a hint.
Need those hints.
All right, again, hot, cool, and archive. You can match hot, cool, and archive with the descriptions.
The first one is right. First and first.
Cool is
Last one.
Hot is optimized for storing the data that is accessed frequently.
Mm-hmm.
so hot is the same line. Cool
Yes.
is the last one, right?
Last
Optimized
one.
for
Yes.
infrequently accessed data.
Yep.
Archive is
Archive.
rarely accessed. You
Yep.
see that? Well, that should be simple enough. Which options are needed to create Azure file share?
Well,
Name and quota, name location and quota, name and access tier, name quota and resource group.
2.
name is common on all of them, so okay.
So either last one
Go down here.
Where do you create Azure file share? Do you remember?
So files.
Do you need to specify resource group for an Azure file share?
No, you don't need.
No, right? Why? Because you create it inside the storage. Storage has the resource group. So resource group is not required, right? So the last one is out, right? Access tier by default is coming from the storage. You can change it. I mean, you can select it, but it is not needed. Makes sense? When it says needed, that means must. You need to have it, otherwise it will not create that resource. Okay. So then the thing left is name, location, quota. What is location? Does it make sense?
Location gonna come from resource group.
Yeah, so it is already there, right?
Yeah.
So the only thing you need to specify is the name and the quota, like how much quota that file share will have. Another exhibit. So according to the code snippet in exhibit, which two properties of the easy storage blob copy start command are required? So the command is easy storage blob copy start.
Last one.
So very
Yeah.
simple, right? Whatever is in the square brackets are optional attributes. Whatever is not in the square bracket is a mandatory attribute. Mandatory attributes are destination blob and destination container.
Last one.
That's the answer.
Last one.
Yeah.
No, it's for-
Sometimes it could be straightforward, sometimes it could be tricky. Okay. But as far as you remember the format, it will help you a lot. Okay. Okay, so let's look.
About all the above.
It is all of the above, actually.
Oh, that is
On the test, they're all of the above.
I used for 900.
This looks like 900 now. Okay. Microsoft Azure Storage Explorer is best described as standalone tool that this is marketing, right?
Yep.
So you need to
one.
choose.
Second.
So you need to choose the second one. I mean, if you just remember, like when you go to the download, right, it shows you the operating systems to choose, and you can choose to download.
I wasn't
based on
sure
your
about it yesterday when I was taking these questions. So I did go to the site to download it and make sure which ones are there.
All right. Yeah. So you can always do that, and I would prefer you do that. So at least you will go there, you will see some more things as well, related to it. Another marketing questions.
All of the above.
Man, this is gonna be easy exam. Next.
See, I have to boost our confidence, right?
Man, we're gonna buy you lunch.
It is. This is the exact exam.
This is the exact exam.
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Or maybe he's giving us a simple question to boost our confidence.
Yeah. So I think we have covered enough questions. So couple of things. If you're going to do AZ 900, right? As I said, AZ 900 is slightly broader than AZ 104. So look at some more services in broader context. You don't have to go deep into that. Okay, I'll send you a link which covers everything.
Okay.
So things which you have not covered, for example, is costing I have not covered. Okay, but sometimes it pops up in AZ 900 exam. Like, for example, if you wanted to do comparison between your on-prem versus Azure, like if you're like telling somebody that, hey, you need to move from on-prem to Azure, you need to give them explanation, right? How much you will save, etc. Right? For that, there's a tool called Azure cost calculator, okay, or TCO calculator, total cost of ownership, which you can use to do that. So I'll send you some links so you can like just go through that. So those kind of questions might come up, and since we have not covered so much of that, you should not feel like, oh, I don't know about this service. But if you spend 15 minutes, you'll be able to answer all those questions because they're not like in depth. You just say which calculator you will use for what. So for example, TCO calculator you will use if you want to compare, money spent on-prem versus cloud. It will give you benefits of like in the next 5 years, how much you can save by moving to the cloud, for example. Okay. Same way, there's a pricing calculator, but pricing calculator is used for, calculating price for your solution. So for example, in Azure, I want to deploy a web application. A web application requires SQL database, 2 VMs, and 1 storage account. So I want to find out total of these, like how much I will spend per month on these resources if I want to maintain my web application there. If you want to do that, there's a pricing calculator for that. Okay, and then there's something called cost savings. Means how do I find out how much I am paying for the cost? Right, so in the portal there's a cost explorer. You can go there. For example, let me show you that quickly. Right, so you can always go for like cost management. Right, here it will tell you like how much you are spending, like what is your current cost, what will be your next month bill, and things like that. You can do cost analysis, for example. You can set up your cost alert as well. So for example, if I don't want to be charged, I can create like, $0 budget and say, if it goes beyond my $0 budget, give me an alert or send me an email, right? So budget is for setting up a budget saying, hey, for this resource group or this resource, my budget is $50 per month, right? Then I can basically track against my budget how I'm doing. Makes sense? So sometimes these kind of questions might pop up in AZ 900. Okay. What else? So yeah, so I have shared the material. I'll keep on sending few more links. So just keep watch on the classroom for the exam preparation, and then I'll send you one final exam as well. So once you are prepared, try to take that exam.
Okay.
Okay, so it will be 48 question exam, and try to take that. And then based on that, you can do some more things based on how you do in that exam, and then I'll prepare a final exam as well. So I'll do one exam, end of this week and one exam end of next week. And I want to prepare according to the plan which I have given you. Yeah.
Okay, I do want to share one PDF with you, which we can share with the students,
Uh-huh.
which has some AD 104 questions.
Which FAQ?
No, it's a PDF.
Oh yeah,
of
sure.
104
Yeah.
questions.
So if you can send me, I'll put on the classroom, or you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
directly put on the classroom stream.
Okay, can I?
Yeah. So you can just go to here on the
So do
classroom.
we send you the exams once we complete it? The one you're gonna post?
Yeah. So I'll so once